You stand in a field of churned mud and freezing rain. Your shoulders ache under 60 pounds of steel that has been pressing into your flesh for hours. Through the narrow slit of your visor, the world is a blurred, gray smear. You are not a hero in a tapestry. You are a sweating, terrified man trapped inside a metal oven that smells of wet wool and old rust. You feel the weight of your social status, but it offers little comfort when the dysentery begins to cramp your stomach. This is the reality behind the golden legends. Forget the stories of chivalry and shining armor. You are about to discover why the life of a medieval knight was less about glory and more about enduring a long, cold, and incredibly painful struggle for survival. Welcome to the brutal truth of the Middle Ages. You are standing in the middle of a windswept field in northern France. The year is 1346, but the date matters less than the weight pressing down on your collarbones. Close your eyes for a moment and forget everything you think you know about being a hero. Forget the polished silver suits you have seen in museums. Forget the Hollywood images of handsome men with flowing hair galloping effortlessly across sun-dappled meadows to rescue a grateful maiden. That world does not exist. It never did. Instead, feel the reality of your current situation. You are encased in a cage of iron and steel that you did not put on yourself, because it is physically impossible to do so. You needed 2 men to help you winch and buckle the plates over your body. Underneath the metal, you are wearing a thick, quilted tunic called a gambeson. It is made of dozens of layers of linen stuffed with scrap wool or even horsehair. It is meant to act as a shock absorber, but right now it acts as a sponge. It is soaked through with your own sweat, and because it is almost never washed, it carries the pungent, sour stench of old dampness and fungal rot. Now imagine the heat. It is a humid afternoon, and you are trapped inside a personal oven. The sun beats down on the steel, and the metal transfers that heat directly into your padded undergarments. You cannot wipe the sweat from your eyes. You cannot scratch the itch that has been crawling across your shoulder blade for the last 3 hours. You are a prisoner in your own skin, and the air you breathe is stale, recycled, and tastes of iron. This is the physical reality of the man the poets call the flower of Christian manhood. The myth of the gallant knight is a beautiful, shimmering tapestry woven by storytellers to hide a very ugly truth. We have been sold a version of history where the knight is a paragon of virtue, a protector of the weak, and a gentleman of the highest order. But if you were to actually meet one of these men, you would likely be terrified. You walk through the village, and the peasants do not look at you with admiration. They look at the ground. They hide their daughters and their livestock. To them, you are not a hero. You are a state-sanctioned engine of violence. You are a legal thug with the backing of the church and the crown. The word chivalry itself comes from the French word chevalier, which simply means a man on a horse. In its earliest forms, the code of chivalry had very little to do with being nice to people. It was a practical necessity, a way to keep a class of highly trained, heavily armed young men from murdering each other and burning down everything in sight. You have been raised since the age of 7 to do one thing and one thing only, to kill people in the most efficient way possible. You were taken from your mother and sent to a distant lord's castle to be a page. You spent your childhood running errands and being beaten by older boys to toughen your skin. By 14, you were a squire, cleaning the filth out of stables and sharpening blades until your fingers bled. You have no other skills. You cannot farm. You cannot trade. You are a professional predator. The romantic stories tell you that you fight for honor, but look at your ledger and you will see a different story. Being a knight is a crushing financial burden. You are expected to provide your own equipment, and it costs a fortune. Your suit of plate armor costs as much as a small farm. Your sword, a masterpiece of metallurgy, is the price of several houses. And then there are the horses. You cannot just have one. You need a massive, powerful destrier for the charge, a lighter palfrey for travel, and a pack horse for your gear. You have to pay for squires, for grooms, and for the upkeep of a household that reflects your status. If you do not win in battle, if you do not capture a wealthy enemy and hold him for ransom, you will face financial ruin. The pressure to be violent is not just about glory. It is about debt. You feel the weight of your helmet as you lower the visor. Suddenly, the world disappears. Your field of vision is reduced to two thin slits that turn the horizon into a narrow, blurry strip. You cannot see your feet. You cannot see the man standing 10 feet to your right. You are isolated in a world of metal echoes. Every time you move your head, the helmet clangs. Every breath you take sounds like a bellows in a forge. You are effectively blind and deaf to anything that is not directly in front of you. The poets sing of the lady's favor, a silken scarf tied around your arm as you ride into the lists. But look at the scarf. It is stained with the mud of the road and the grease of the camp. The courtly love you hear about in the songs is a game for the bored elite, a distraction from the fact that most marriages in your world are cold, calculated business transactions designed to merge land titles and sheep grazing rights. There is very little room for romance when you spend 10 months of the year on campaign, sleeping in a damp tent and eating hard bread that you have to tap on the table to knock the weevils out of. Think about the physical toll this life takes on you. You are not yet 30, but your joints ache like those of an old man. Carrying 60 pounds of steel every day has compressed your spine. Your knees are shot from the constant strain of bracing in the stirrups. If you fall off your horse in battle, you are not going to leap back up with a graceful somersault. You are going to hit the ground with the force of a falling anvil. You will lie there, struggling like a beetle on its back, hoping your squire can reach you before an enemy footman finds the gap in your armpit with a dagger. The shining lie of the night is that he is a creature of the light. In reality, you are a creature of the mud. Your glorious charges usually end in a chaotic, screaming pile of broken horse legs and shattered lances. Your great victories are often just the result of you and your friends trampling a crowd of hungry, terrified peasants who had the misfortune of being drafted into a lord's quarrel. You are told you are the defender of the faith, but you spend your days burning the crops of other Christians to starve them into submission. This is the Shevachi, the scorched earth policy that is the bread and butter of medieval warfare. It is not noble. It is a slow, grinding process of atrocity. You look down at your gauntlets. They are intricately made, a marvel of craftsmanship with individual scales of steel that allow your fingers to move. But look closer. In the crevices of those scales, there is dried blood and horse manure that you can never quite get out. No matter how much you polish the surface, the grime of your profession remains in the cracks. You are part of an elite caste that is slowly becoming obsolete, but for now, you are the apex predator of the continent. The world of the night is one of contradictions. You are a monk of war, yet you are surrounded by the most worldly of temptations. You are a symbol of order, yet you bring chaos wherever you gallop. You are told you are the peak of human achievement, yet you spend your life in a state of physical discomfort that a modern person could not endure for an hour. The myth is the silver plating, but underneath is the heavy, rusted iron of reality. As the sun begins to set over the valley, the light catches your breastplate, and for a fleeting second, you look like the legend. You look like the hero the singers will talk about for 1,000 years. But then the wind shifts, and you smell the latrine pits of the camp behind you. You feel the raw skin where your greaves have been rubbing your shins raw all day. You realize that you are not a character in a story. You are a tired, dirty, and deeply stressed man who just wants to sit down without 30 pounds of metal crushing his hips. The shining lie is a powerful thing. It has convinced generations of people that the Middle Ages were a time of magic and high ideals. But as you stand here, adjusting the heavy belt that holds your sword, you know that the only thing magical about your life is that you have managed to survive this long. The armor does not make the man. It just hides how much he is suffering. You are a knight, and before the day is over, you will have to prove it in the dirt and the blood, far away from the songs and the tapestries. This is the beginning of your journey into the dark heart of the medieval world. And the first thing you must leave behind is the idea that any of this is beautiful. Imagine you are 7 years old, at an age when modern children are just starting to master basic addition or lose their first baby teeth. Your childhood is effectively over. You are standing in the mud of your father's courtyard, watching a horse being readied for a long journey. Your mother is likely weeping, though she tries to hide it, because she knows that from this moment on, you no longer belong to her. You belong to the system. You are being sent away, perhaps dozens or hundreds of miles, to the castle of a distant relative, a powerful baron, or your father's liege lord. This is not a summer camp or a prestigious boarding school. This is your new life, and it is a life defined entirely by service. When you arrive at the castle, the first thing that hits you is the sheer, oppressive scale of it. To a 7-year-old boy, these stone walls look like the ribs of a giant. It is loud, it is crowded, and it smells of damp stone, horse manure, and old smoke that never quite finds its way out of the high rafters. You are no longer the son of a house. You are a page, the lowest rung on a very long and very sharp social ladder. There is no gentle transition period. One day you are playing with wooden toys in your mother's solar, and the next you are being handed a set of chores that would make a modern adult exhausted by noon. Your day begins long before the sun has actually managed to warm the freezing stone of the dormitory. You sleep on a thin pallet, perhaps shared with 3 or 4 other boys your age. The air is thick with the smell of unwashed bodies and the damp straw of the mattresses. There is no such thing as privacy in the medieval world, especially not for a child in training. You wake up shivering, and your first task is to make yourself presentable. Cleanliness is a relative term in the Middle Ages, but for a page, it is a requirement of service. You must wash your face in water that is often skimmed of ice, and you must ensure your tunic is straight and free of lint. If you look sloppy, you will be punished, not with a stern word or a timeout, but with a stinging blow from a tutor's switch or a senior knight's heavy hand. The primary role of a page is to learn the art of being a servant. This might sound strange for a member of the nobility, but in the medieval mind, you cannot lead men until you have learned to serve them. You spend your mornings in the Great Hall. This room, which looked so majestic from the outside, is a drafty nightmare in the winter. You are taught how to set the massive trestle tables. You learn the exact placement of the salt cellar, the bread trenchers, and the shared cups. This is not just about being polite. It is a ritual of power. Every person at that table has a specific rank, and if you place a bowl in front of the wrong person, you have insulted an armed warrior who takes his social standing very seriously. Mealtimes are a marathon of endurance for you. While the lords and ladies feast on roasted venison, spiced stews, and heavy wines, you are standing. You stand behind your master's chair, perfectly still, for hours. Your legs ache, your stomach rumbles, and the steam from the food is a constant torture. You are expected to anticipate every need. If the Lord's cup is half empty, you must be there to fill it. If he needs his meat carved, you must do it with precision. You are learning the art of the knife. It is a delicate skill, carving meat in a way that is elegant and efficient. If you slip, if you drop a morsel of food, or if you spill a single drop of wine on the Lord's silk sleeves, the consequences are immediate and physical. Between meals, your education is divided between the courtly and the martial. You are expected to learn the basics of courtesy. This means learning how to speak to your betters with the correct titles, how to bow until your back feels like it might snap, and how to sing or play an instrument like the lute. To the modern ear, this sounds like a finishing school, but in the brutal world of a knight, these social graces are your shield. A knight who cannot navigate the politics of the court is a knight who ends up dead in a ditch because he offended the wrong duke at the wrong time. But then comes the physical training. This is where the reality of your future profession starts to sink in. Even at 7 or 8 years old, you are being prepared for a life of professional violence. You are given wooden swords called wasters, which are often weighted with lead to make them heavier than a real blade. You spend hours hacking at a wooden post called a quinton. Your arms grow heavy, your palms blister and bleed, and your shoulders feel like they are being pulled from their sockets. You are told that if you cannot strike the post with enough force now, you will never survive the weight of a real sword later. Wrestling is another core part of your day. You and the other pages are pitted against one another in the dirt of the inner ward. This is not a friendly game. The older boys, those who are 10 or 11, will take delight in grinding your face into the mud. The tutors watch not to stop the bullying, but to see who has the stomach for it. They want to see if you will cry or if you will fight back. In this world, tears are a sign of weakness that must be beaten out of you as quickly as possible. You learn to swallow your pain, to mask your fear, and to keep your eyes on your opponent. Then there are the constant chores. You are not just a student, you are a laborer. You spend hours in the stables, learning the anatomy of horses from the ground up. You muck out stalls, you groom the massive war horses that weigh over 1,000 pounds, and you learn to dodge their heavy hooves. You are responsible for cleaning the armor of the older squires and knights. You spend hours rubbing sand and vinegar into chainmail to keep the rust away. The smell of metal and vinegar gets under your fingernails and stays there for years. Your hands, which should be soft and youthful, become calloused and scarred. The psychological toll of this life is something that history books often skip over. You are a child who has been removed from everything familiar. You have no personal time. You have no personal space. You are constantly under the gaze of men who value strength above all else. The discipline is unrelenting. If you are caught slacking or if you are caught being childish, you are whipped. It is a world where the adults are not protectors but taskmasters. You are being forged, and the forge is a place of heat and pressure. You also begin to see the dark side of the nobility you were born into. You see the knights when they are drunk, when they are cruel, and when they are exhausted. You see that the chivalry you hear about in songs is often a thin veneer over a very violent and messy reality. You see the way the servants are treated, and you realize that the only thing separating you from them is your bloodline and your ability to eventually kill people better than they can. As the years of your pagehood pass, you change. The 7-year-old boy who cried for his mother is gone. By the time you are 12 or 13, you are lean, hard, and perpetually tired. You have learned how to serve a 10-course banquet without breaking a sweat. You have learned how to take a punch and stay on your feet. You have learned the complex rules of heraldry and the subtle language of the court. You are no longer a child. You are a tool being sharpened for the next stage of your transformation. The transition from page to squire is not a celebration. It is simply a move from one level of hardship to another. But as you look at your scarred hands and feel the new muscles in your back, you realize you have survived the first test. You have endured the cold, the hunger, the beatings, and the humiliation of service. You have left your childhood behind in the mud of the practice field and the shadows of the great hall. You are ready to move closer to the iron heart of the medieval world, even if that world has already started to break you. The life of a page was designed to strip away the individual and replace it with a servant of the crown and the sword. It was a childhood defined by the absence of play and the abundance of duty. Every bow you made, every horse you brushed, and every bruise you earned was a step away from the warmth of the hearth and a step toward the cold steel of the battlefield. This was the foundation of knighthood, and it was built on the backs of children who were never allowed to be children at all. By the end of this period, you have become a master of your own physical presence. You have watched the men you will one day become, and you have learned their secrets. The transition to becoming a squire is looming, and with it, the stakes will only get higher. The wooden swords will be replaced by steel, and the training ground will start to look more and more like a graveyard. Step into the dim light of the armory. It is early morning, and the air is thick with the scent of wood smoke, lanolin, and the sharp, metallic tang of cold steel. You are standing on a wooden platform, stripped down to your basic undergarments. Your skin feels the bite of the morning chill, but you know that within the hour, you will be begging for a single breath of this cold air. You are about to be encased. You are about to enter your golden cage. Before the first piece of metal even touches your skin, you have to put on the foundation. This is the gambeson. Imagine a coat made of 20 layers of heavy linen, quilted together so tightly it feels like wearing a mattress. It is stiff, it is thick, and it is heavy. As your squire slides it over your head and begins to lace it tight, you feel the first surge of heat. The gambeson is designed to absorb the shock of a mace or a warhammer, but its primary function right now is to serve as a cushion. Without it, the steel would chafe your skin raw in minutes. With it, you are already beginning to sweat, and the sun hasn't even fully risen. Now comes the hardware. You do not simply put on a suit of armor like a pair of overalls. It is a mathematical puzzle of leather straps, iron buckles, and steel plates that must be assembled from the ground up. Your squire kneels at your feet to attach the greaves. These are the plates that protect your shins. Then come the sabatons, the articulated steel shoes that turn your feet into heavy, metal hooves. Every step you take from this point forward will be accompanied by a rhythmic, metallic clatter. You feel the weight settling onto your ankles, a constant, nagging reminder that gravity is now your primary enemy. The squire moves up to your thighs, strapping on the cuisses and the polions that protect your knees. This is where the engineering of the 14th and 15th centuries truly shines, but also where it begins to torture you. These plates are held up by leather thongs called points, which are tied directly to a heavy belt around your waist. If your squire ties them too loose, the armor will slide down and trip you. If he ties them too tight, the leather will dig into your hips until you are bruised and bleeding. You can feel the blood flow in your legs slowing down as the pressure increases. You haven't even picked up a sword yet, and your lower body already feels like it belongs to someone else. Then comes the torso. The breastplate is lowered over your chest, followed by the backplate. The squire cinches the leather straps at your sides, pulling them taut. You take a deep breath, or at least you try to. This is the moment where the claustrophobia usually starts to set in. The steel does not move. It does not expand. When you try to fill your lungs, your ribcage hits the unyielding wall of the breastplate. Your breathing becomes shallow. You are forced to breathe from your throat rather than your diaphragm. It is a tight, restrictive sensation that will stay with you for the next 6, 8, or 12 hours. You are now living in a pressurized canister of your own body heat. Next are the arms. The rear braces for your upper arms, the vambraces for your forearms, and the couters for your elbows. Your squire must ensure that the joints are perfectly aligned. If the elbow of the armor is off by even half an inch, you won't be able to bend your arm fully. You are becoming a statue, a walking monument of iron and steel. Every limb is encased. Every movement requires a conscious effort to overcome the friction of metal sliding on metal and the sheer mass of the suit. A full harness of plate armor weighs between 45 and 60 pounds. While that weight is distributed across your body, it is a constant, draining tax on your stamina. Every time you lift your arm to strike, you are lifting 10 pounds of steel along with it. Finally, the squire holds up the helmet. This is the grand finale of your transformation. As the heavy steel bucket is lowered over your head and bolted to your gorget, the world changes instantly. The sounds of the armory, the neighing horses, the shouting men, the clanging of the forge, all of it is suddenly muffled. Sounds like you are underwater. The smell of the room vanishes, replaced by the scent of your own breath bouncing off the cold steel in front of your face. You look out through the visor. This is perhaps the most terrifying part of being a knight. Your field of vision is reduced to a slit about half an inch wide and 4 inches long. You have no peripheral vision. You cannot see your own feet. You cannot see the sky. You are looking at the world through a mailbox slot. To see anything to your left or right, you must turn your entire upper body, because the helmet is often locked to the breastplate to prevent your neck from being snapped by a lance. Now imagine the sun coming up. You are standing in a field in mid-July. The sun beats down on the polished steel, and the metal begins to conduct that heat directly into the padded gambeson beneath. You are inside an oven. Within 20 minutes, the sweat is pouring down your face, stinging your eyes, but you cannot wipe them. You cannot scratch your nose. You cannot move the hair out of your vision. You are trapped in a dark, boiling metal box. You try to move, and you realize that your center of gravity has shifted. You are no longer the agile person you were an hour ago. You are a tank, but a tank made of flesh and bone. If you trip over a root or a stone that you couldn't see through your tiny visor, the fall is not a simple stumble. It is a catastrophic event. You hit the ground with a bone-shaking thud that vibrates through every tooth in your head. And once you are down, getting back up is a feat of heroic strength. You have to fight the weight of the suit, the restriction of the joints, and the lack of oxygen as you scramble to find your footing while an enemy soldier is likely running toward you with a dagger to find the gaps in your armpits. The physical exhaustion is unlike anything you have ever experienced. In modern terms, imagine running a marathon while wearing a weighted vest, a winter coat, and a motorcycle helmet with the visor blacked out. That is the daily reality of the knight on the march or in the fray. Your heart rate skyrockets, but because you cannot breathe deeply, your muscles begin to scream for oxygen almost immediately. Many knights didn't die from sword wounds or spear thrusts. They died from heat stroke. They died because their hearts simply gave out under the strain of carrying 60 pounds of steel in the summer heat. And then there is the noise. When the battle begins, the sound is deafening. Every time a mace hits your shoulder or a sword clangs against your helmet, it is like being inside a bell while someone hits it with a sledgehammer. The vibration rattles your brain. The ringing in your ears becomes a permanent companion. You are isolated in your own private world of pain and noise, unable to hear the commands of your commander or the warnings of your comrades. By the end of the day, when the battle is over or the training is done, you are a broken man. Your squire has to peel the armor off you piece by piece. When the breastplate is finally removed, the first breath of fresh air feels like a miracle. But your body is covered in deep purple welts where the straps have bitten into your skin. Your joints ache with a dull, throbbing heat. Your feet are swollen. You are dehydrated, shaky, and physically spent. This was the price of survival. The armor was the only thing that could keep you alive against the terrors of the medieval battlefield. But it was also a heavy, stifling, and agonizing burden. You were the most protected person on the field, but you were also the most miserable. You were a titan of war, wrapped in a golden cage that you had to pay a small fortune to own and a physical toll to wear. And yet, tomorrow morning, when the sun rises and the cold air bites again, you will stand on that same wooden platform and let the squire begin the process all over again. Because in this world, if you want to be a hero, you have to be willing to be crushed by the weight of your own glory. You stand in the drafty hall of your manor house, watching the flickering candlelight dance across a piece of parchment. It is not a poem or a letter from a lover. It is a ledger, and the numbers written on it are terrifying. You are a knight, a member of the elite, a man of iron and blood. To the peasants in the village, you are a god. To the king, you are a pillar of the realm. But to your own household accounts, you are a disaster waiting to happen. You have spent your entire life preparing for the glory of battle, but no one told you that the most dangerous enemy you would ever face would be the crushing weight of your own debt. To understand why it sucks to be you, you must first understand that being a knight is not just a job. It is an extremely expensive lifestyle that you are legally and socially required to maintain. Think of it like being forced to own a fleet of fighter jets while having the income of a middle manager. You are a professional warrior in an age where the tools of your trade are the most expensive objects on the planet. Let us start with your horse. You do not just have one. You need a stable of them. Your primary warhorse, the destrier, is not a common farm animal. It is a biological tank, bred for aggression and strength, trained to kick and bite on command. A good destrier can cost you as much as a small village earns in a year. If that horse trips in a rabbit hole or takes an arrow to the chest during a skirmish, you have just watched the equivalent of a modern mansion vanish into the mud. And you cannot just ride your destrier to the battlefield. If you did, the poor beast would be exhausted before the fight even began. So, you need a palfrey for traveling, a few pack horses for your gear, and remounts for when your first horse inevitably dies or is injured. You are essentially a walking logistics nightmare, and every mouth in your stable eats grain that your peasants worked months to harvest. Then there is the armor. You might imagine that a suit of mail or plate is a one-time purchase. It is not. As technology evolves, your old gear becomes a death trap. If the neighboring lords are all switching to articulated plate and you are still wearing a heavy hauberk of chainmail, you are a dead man walking. You have to visit the armorer, a specialist who charges rates that would make a modern surgeon blush. Every piece of steel must be custom fitted to your body. If it is too tight, you cannot breathe. If it is too loose, a spear point will find the gap. You pay for the steel, you pay for the craftsmanship, and then you pay for the maintenance. Iron rusts. Leather straps rot in the rain. Every time you come home from a campaign, your gear looks like it has been through a meat grinder, and the bills to fix it start piling up before you have even washed the blood off your hands. But you do not travel alone. A knight is a social unit. You must have a squire to help you into that armor, a page to run your errands, and several grooms to handle the horses. You are responsible for their clothes, their food, and their safety. You have to project an image of wealth and power because if you look poor, you look weak. If you look weak, your neighbors will start looking at your borderlands with greedy eyes. So, you buy the fine silks, you host the expensive feasts, and you give out generous gifts that you cannot actually afford. You are trapped in a cycle of performative consumption where the penalty for stopping is total social collapse. Now, let us imagine the king calls for war. In your younger days, you might have felt a spark of excitement. Now, all you feel is a cold pit in your stomach. You are required by feudal law to provide 40 days of military service at your own expense. Let that sink in for a moment. You are going to war, risking your life, and you are paying for the privilege. You have to buy the supplies, the extra horses, the wagons, and the food for your entire retinue. You are leaving your lands during the harvest season, which means your crops might rot in the fields because there is no one there to oversee the peasants. Every mile you march toward the front line is another penny out of your pocket. And then comes the battle. You survive the initial charge, the chaos of the melee, and the screaming of the dying. But then, a group of enemy soldiers surrounds you. They do not kill you. Why would they? You are worth much more to them alive. They knock you off your horse, pin you to the ground, and declare you their prisoner. This is the moment your life truly falls apart. This is the ransom. In the medieval world, capturing a knight is like winning the lottery. Your captors will treat you with a terrifying sort of politeness while they calculate exactly how much your family can pay to get you back. They will send a messenger to your manor with a demand for a sum that sounds like a fairy tale. To pay it, your wife will have to sell the family silver. Your stewards will have to squeeze the peasants until they are starving. You might have to sell off entire woods or mills, or even the rights to the very land your ancestors fought for. Some knights spend years in comfortable but soul-crushing captivity, while their families go into absolute bankruptcy trying to buy their freedom. You are a high-stakes bargaining chip in a game where you are also the one paying the bill. If you are lucky enough to avoid capture and return home, you often find your estate in shambles. Without your firm hand, the bailiffs have been stealing, the fences are down, and the local moneylenders are knocking on your door. In the later Middle Ages, many knights found themselves in the hands of professional creditors. You start by mortgaging a small field, then a manor house. Soon you are paying interest on loans just to keep the roof over your head from leaking. You see the rising merchant class in the cities. Men who have never held a sword but wear finer robes than you do, and it burns. You have the title, you have the lineage, but they have the coin. You find yourself looking at your son, who is training in the courtyard with a wooden sword. You should feel pride, but instead you feel guilt. You are passing down a legacy of debt. You are training him for a life of magnificent poverty. You will have to find him a wife with a massive dowry just to save the family name, turning your own child into a financial transaction because that is the only way to keep the armor polished. The physical pain of being a knight, the broken bones and the infections, are nothing compared to the quiet, grinding stress of the ledger. You are an Iron Man in a world that is increasingly being run by gold. You are a relic of a system that demands you look like a hero while you live like a beggar. Every time you strap on your sword belt, you feel the weight of it, not just the steel, but the cost of every link in your mail. You realize that the glory of the charge is a fleeting moment of adrenaline, followed by a lifetime of trying to figure out how to pay for the horse you rode in on. You are the defender of the realm, the flower of chivalry, and you are utterly, hopelessly broke. As you blow out the candle in your hall, The smell of burnt wax reminds you of the cold reality of your station. You are a knight, and the price of your glory is your ruin. Because in this world, the most expensive thing you can possibly be is a hero. Imagine the sun. Not the gentle, warming sun of a lazy spring afternoon, but the absolute punishing glare of high noon in the middle of July. You are standing in a meadow somewhere in France or perhaps on a dusty plain in the Holy Land. There is no shade here. There is only the long, flat expanse of the earth and a sky that feels as though it is pressing down on your shoulders with the weight of a physical hand. You are already tired, and the battle has not even begun. You have been awake since before dawn, preparing for this moment, but as the temperature climbs, you begin to realize that your greatest enemy today is not the man standing across the field with a spear. Your greatest enemy is the very thing that is supposed to keep you alive. It starts with the padding. Before the first piece of steel ever touches your skin, you are wrapped in layers of thick linen and wool. This is your gambeson. It is a quilted garment, stuffed with scrap wool or horsehair, designed to act as a shock absorber. It is your first line of defense against the crushing force of a mace or the piercing tip of an arrow. However, right now, it is performing a much more sinister function. It is trapping every single degree of your body heat against your ribs. You are already sweating, and that sweat has absolutely nowhere to go. It does not evaporate. It cannot provide you with the cooling relief that nature intended. Instead, it is soaking into the wool, making the garment heavier, thicker, and more restrictive by the minute. You feel as though you are wearing a heavy winter coat while standing in the middle of a bonfire. The damp fabric begins to chafe against your neck and armpits, but you cannot reach in to scratch or adjust it. You are locked in. Now come the plates. Your squires are busy moving around you, their hands a blur of motion as they pull leather straps tight and click steel buckles into place. Each piece of polished metal is a masterpiece of medieval engineering, but in this heat, it is also a perfect thermal conductor. If you were to touch the surface of your breastplate after it has been sitting in the direct sun for an hour, it would likely burn your fingertips. Now, imagine that heat radiating inward, passing through the layers of your gambeson and soaking into your very bones. It is not just the weight of the steel that bothers you, though the 60 pounds of metal certainly weigh heavily on your joints and spine. It is the absolute stillness of the air inside the suit. Once the greaves are strapped to your legs and the breastplate is cinched tight around your chest, you are encased in a private microclimate of your own making. You are a walking greenhouse and the temperature is rising. Then comes the final piece of the puzzle, the helmet. When your squire lowers the visor and the latch clicks shut, the world as you know it disappears. Your peripheral vision vanishes instantly, replaced by two narrow, horizontal slits that offer a flickering, letterboxed view of the grass and the horizon. But the visual isolation is nothing compared to the sensation of the air, or rather, the lack of it. Every time you exhale, your hot, moist breath bounces off the curved steel of the visor and rushes back into your nose and your mouth. You are breathing your own carbon dioxide. The air inside the helmet quickly becomes thick, metallic, and tastes like old copper and salt. There is no breeze here. Even if a strong wind were to blow across the battlefield, it could not find its way through the tiny, pin-sized breathing holes drilled into the side of your faceplate. You are suffocating in the middle of an open field. You try to take a deep, stabilizing breath, but your breastplate will not allow it. To protect your internal organs from the impact of a lance, the steel must be rigid and unyielding. It does not expand when your lungs want to grow. You are forced to take shallow, rapid sips of air, like a fish gasping on a riverbank. Your heart rate begins to climb, not just from the adrenaline of the coming fight, but from the sheer physical effort of existing. Every time you lift your arm to test the weight of your sword, your muscles burn through precious oxygen that your lungs simply cannot provide. Your pulse thumps in your ears, a rhythmic drumming that drowns out the sounds of the camp around you. Now, imagine the order is given to move. You are not just standing anymore. You are marching, or perhaps your horse is spurred into a gallop, and you are bracing your entire body against the violent motion. The internal temperature of a knight in full plate during a physical struggle can reach levels that would cause a modern athlete to be rushed to an emergency room. You are essentially a human being wrapped in a tea kettle that has been set to boil. Your core temperature climbs to 103, then 104 degrees. Your brain starts to feel fuzzy and distant. The edges of your vision begin to go dark and swim with spots, not because of a wound, but because your blood is rushing to the surface of your skin in a desperate, futile attempt to cool you down. This leaves your brain starved of the oxygen and pressure it needs to function. Then there is the mud. If you fall, you are in grave and immediate danger. Historical accounts of battles like Agincourt tell a horrifying story that the tapestries often leave out. Many knights did not die from the thrust of a sword or the strike of an axe. They died because they fell face down in the churned-up earth. When you are wearing 60 pounds of steel and your muscles are screaming with the fatigue of heatstroke, pushing yourself up out of a puddle of thick, clay-like mud is an Olympian feat that your body may no longer be capable of performing. If you cannot roll over onto your back, you will drown in 2 inches of water and filth. You will suffocate under the weight of your own armor and the bodies of the men falling on top of you. It is a panicked, claustrophobic way to die, staring at the dark, wet earth through a tiny slit in a steel mask, unable to move a single finger to save yourself. The thirst is not just a nuisance. It is a physical pain that radiates through your entire skull. It is a deep, agonizing ache in your throat and a rhythmic pounding in your temples. Your tongue feels like a piece of dry, dusty leather that has grown too large for your mouth. You would give away your family estate and every gold coin you own for a single cup of lukewarm water, but you cannot reach your face. You cannot even wipe the stinging, salt-heavy sweat out of your eyes. It runs down your forehead in rivulets, pools in your eyebrows, and then drips into your pupils, blinding you in the middle of a life-or-death struggle. You have to blink rapidly and shake your head like a trapped animal just to see the man who is trying to kill you. History books remember the beautiful shine of the sun on the silver suits. They remember the colorful banners fluttering in the wind and the noble silhouette of the mounted warrior. But the history books often forget the smell. The smell inside that suit is a nauseating cocktail of old, sour sweat, wet wool, and the sharp, metallic tang of the steel. It is the smell of a human body pushed to its absolute breaking point. During the Crusades, knights would sometimes simply drop dead from the sun before they ever reached the enemy lines. Their hearts would give out, or their brains would effectively cook inside their own skulls. They were found by their comrades perfectly intact, without a single scratch on their armor, having been defeated by the very metal that was supposed to keep them safe from harm. You are a walking fortress, it is true. You are the absolute pinnacle of medieval military technology and the most feared presence on the field. But a fortress is not meant to move, and a fortress does not need to breathe. As you stand there in the grass, watching the enemy approach through a haze of heat and exhaustion, you realize the terrifying truth. The greatest threat to your life is not the spear in the hand of the man across from you. It is the beautiful, expensive, gleaming suit of iron that is slowly turning into your own personal oven. You are a hero, But you are a hero who is drowning in his own sweat, gasping for a breath of fresh air that the world refuses to give you. The glory of the charge feels very far away when you are simply struggling to stay conscious. You wake up long before the sun has even considered touching the horizon. The air inside your tent or the drafty manor room is cold, but the air in the stables is something else entirely. It is a thick, humid soup of ammonia, wet straw, and the heavy, musky scent of massive animals. As you step into the shadows of the stalls, you are not greeted by the gentle nicker of a loyal companion. Instead, you hear the sharp, metallic kick of a hoof against wood and a shrill, territorial scream that vibrates in your chest. This is your primary tool of war, your greatest asset, and quite possibly, the thing that will bankrupt it or kill you before you ever see a French longbowman. In the modern world, people think of the medieval horse as a noble partner, a gentle giant that shares a spiritual bond with its rider. You know better. To you, the horse is a high-maintenance, temperamental, and incredibly expensive biological engine that requires more attention than your own children. In fact, you do not just have one horse. To be a knight of any standing, you are required to maintain a fleet of them, and each one is a different kind of headache. First, there is your destrier. This is the stallion of legend, the massive beast you see in the tapestries. But the tapestries do not tell you that a destrier is an intact, aggressive male specifically bred and trained to bite, kick, and trample anything in its path. You do not ride the destrier to the battlefield. If you tried to ride him for 20 miles on a muddy road, he would be exhausted and useless by the time the fighting started. No, the destrier is led by a groom while you ride your palfrey. The palfrey is your everyday transport, a horse with a smoother gait that does not destroy your spine over long distances. Then there is the rouncey, a general-purpose horse for your squire, and at least one or two sumpter horses to carry your literal tons of gear, food, and armor. You are essentially a one-man logistics convoy, and every single one of those animals is a ticking clock of potential disaster. Consider the cost. A good destrier can cost you 30 times what a standard farm horse is worth. It is the equivalent of owning a high-performance supercar in a world where there are no mechanics and the fuel is constantly rotting. You spend your days worrying about their feet. If a horse throws a shoe on a rocky path and you do not notice immediately, the hoof will split. A split hoof can lead to an infection, and an infection in a world without antibiotics is a death sentence for a creature that weighs 1,500 pounds. You spend hours watching your farrier work, smelling the acrid, sickening scent of burnt horn as the red-hot iron is pressed against the hoof. If the farrier drives a nail just a fraction of an inch too deep into the quick, your prized warhorse is lame, and you are effectively a commoner on foot. Feeding them is another nightmare. A warhorse cannot survive on the scrub grass found by the side of the road. To maintain the muscle mass required to carry a man in full-plate armor, these animals need grain. They need oats. They need high-quality hay. When you are on campaign, you are constantly obsessed with forage. You find yourself looking at every field of ripening wheat not as a beautiful landscape, but as a potential fuel source that you might have to fight a group of angry peasants to secure. If your horses do not eat, they lose strength. If they lose strength, they stumble. And if a horse stumbles while you are charging at 20 miles per hour, the physics of the situation will ensure that you are crushed under a mountain of meat and steel. Then there is the sheer violence of the animal itself. You have to remember that your destrier is not a pet. He is a weapon. When you are in the stable, you have to be constantly on guard. A sudden movement can trigger a kick that will shatter your femur. Many knights have been killed or permanently maimed not by an enemy sword, but by a horse that got spooked in the middle of the night. These stallions hate each other. If the grooms are not careful and two destriers get close enough to catch a scent, the stable becomes a cacophony of screaming, biting, and chaos that can tear the very building down. You are responsible for this. You are responsible for the damage they do and the lives they take. When the day of battle finally arrives, the horse ceases to be a luxury and becomes a source of pure terror. You spend an hour getting hoisted into the saddle, your armor clanking, your vision restricted to the narrow slits of your visor. Beneath you, the horse is dancing. He can smell the blood from the previous skirmishes, he can hear the drums, and he is pumped full of adrenaline. You are not so much riding him as you are trying to direct a landslide. As you begin the charge, you realize how vulnerable your mount truly is. You are covered in steel, but your horse is likely wearing very little. Perhaps a padded cloth caparison or a few leather plates, but for the most part, he is a massive, soft target. The enemy knows this. They are not aiming for you. They are aiming for the animal. You feel the horse scream as an arrow thuds into his neck. You feel the shuddering vibration through the saddle as he takes a spear to the chest. A horse does not die instantly like a person in a storybook. He panics. He rears. He tries to flee through the ranks of your own men, trampling your friends and allies in a blind, agonizing frenzy. If the horse goes down, your world ends. If you are lucky, you are thrown clear into the mud, where you will lie gasping and pinned by the weight of your own gear. If you are unlucky, the horse falls on top of you. There is no sound quite like the wet crunch of a horse's ribcage collapsing under its own weight, except perhaps the sound of your own hip shattering beneath it. You are trapped. The mud rises around your face, and you are staring into the glazed, dying eye of the animal that cost more than your entire village. You are helpless, waiting for a common foot soldier to find the gap in your neck guard with a rusted dagger. Even if you survive the battle, the burden of the stable follows you home. You return to your lands to find that the cost of your campaign has drained your coffers. Your best destrier is dead, and the ones that survived are scarred, skittish, and prone to illness. You have to begin the cycle of breeding, training, and paying all over again. You spend your evenings looking at ledgers, calculating the cost of hay versus the taxes you can squeeze from your tenants. You realize that your entire social status, your entire identity as a knight, is tied to these fickle, dangerous, four-legged liabilities. You walk through the stable one last time before bed. The smell of manure is permanent now, woven into the fibers of your clothes and the pores of your skin. You look at the massive stallion in the end stall. He watches you with a dark, unblinking eye, and for a moment you wonder who is really the master. You provide him with the best food, the best medical care, and the most expensive gear, all so that one day he might carry you into a chaos of mud and iron where you will both likely die in the most undignified way possible. The horse snorts a wet, heavy sound that sprays your tunic with foam. You turn away, your joints aching from the day of riding, knowing that tomorrow morning, the burden begins again. The glory of the night is a lie told by poets who never had to muck out a stall or dodge a killing kick in the dark. It is a life of servitude to a beast that does not love you and a system that will replace you both the moment you fall. Segment 7, Mud and Muck, the filthy reality of campaign life. You dismount from your horse and your boots immediately sink 3 inches into a cold, black soup of earth and animal waste. This is not the glorious pavilion of a tournament. There are no silk banners fluttering in a clean summer breeze here. Instead, you are standing in the middle of a temporary city built on a swamp. To your left, a line of pack mules is being driven through the camp, their hooves churning the ground into a consistency like thick porridge. To your right, A group of infantrymen are trying to start a fire with wood that is far too damp to burn, sending plumes of acrid, stinging smoke into your eyes. Welcome to the campaign. This is where you will live for the next several months, and by the end of the first week, you will have forgotten what it feels like to be truly dry or truly clean. When you think of a knight, you might imagine him standing on a sunlit dais or charging across a pristine grassy field. But the reality of medieval warfare is that 90% of your time is spent waiting, and you are almost always waiting in the mud. Mud is the defining element of your existence. It gets into the treads of your boots, it cakes onto your woolen hosen, and it finds its way into the delicate joints of your armor. If you leave a piece of gear on the ground for more than 5 minutes, it begins to disappear into the earth. The constant dampness is a physical weight that you carry every day. It seeps into your bones and makes your joints ache long before you ever see a battlefield. You walk toward your tent, which is a heavy, cumbersome thing made of thick canvas. In theory, it is supposed to keep the weather out. In practice, it acts as a giant sponge. The canvas smells of wet dog and old mildew. Inside, the floor is nothing more than a layer of straw spread over the damp ground. If you are lucky, the straw is fresh. If you have been in this spot for more than 3 days, the straw has become a matted, rotting carpet that squelches when you step on it. You sit down on your folding stool, which is one of the few luxuries you allowed yourself to bring, and you begin the long, agonizing process of removing your armor. This is the part of campaign life that the songs never mention. You cannot simply take off your harness by yourself. You have to wait for your squire, who is currently covered in just as much filth as you are. As he unlaces your greaves and unbuckles your breastplate, you feel the cold air hit your sweat-soaked undergarments. You have been wearing this quilted gambeson for 14 hours. It is heavy with your own perspiration and the humidity of the camp. It smells of salt, stale iron, and the sour scent of a body that has not been washed in a fortnight. As the squire pulls the heavy fabric over your head, you feel the sudden, sharp bite of the evening chill. Now you have to contend with the inhabitants of your own clothes. Even a knight of high birth cannot escape the lice. They live in the seams of your tunics and the padding of your armor. They are a constant, maddening presence, biting at your skin until you are covered in small, red welts. You spend a few minutes picking at the seams by the light of a flickering tallow candle. But it is a losing battle. There are thousands of them, and there is no way to boil your clothes or bathe properly while you are on the move. You simply accept that you are being eaten alive in small increments. Hunger begins to gnaw at you, but dinner is nothing to look forward to. In the movies, knights feast on roasted boars and fine wine. On a real campaign, you eat whatever has not yet rotted in the supply wagons. Your squire brings you a wooden bowl containing a gray, watery stew. It is made from salted pork that has been soaked to remove the brine, but it still tastes like a lick of pure salt. There are a few wrinkled leeks and some hard, dried peas floating in the broth. Along with this, you have a slab of hardtack, a biscuit baked so hard that you could use it as a weapon. You have to soak it in your stew for several minutes just to make it soft enough to chew without breaking a tooth. As you eat, you have to carefully pick out the small black weevils that have burrowed into the grain. You stop noticing the taste after a while. Food is just fuel, and you need a lot of it to keep your body moving under the weight of your gear. Then there is the water. You are thirsty, but you look at the barrel of water near the tent and hesitate. The water has been sitting there for 2 days, and it has a thin, oily film on the surface. You know that the camp latrines are located just 100 yards upstream from where the water was gathered. This is the great killer of armies. It is not the sword or the arrow that claims the most lives, It is the bloody flux, what we today call dysentery. You have already seen 3 of your men being carried to the outskirts of the camp, their bodies wasted and their strength gone from the constant, violent purging of their bowels. You drink a small amount of watered-down wine instead, hoping the alcohol is strong enough to kill whatever is lurking in the liquid. As night falls, the camp does not grow quiet. A military encampment is a noisy, chaotic place. You can hear the horses in the picket lines neighing and stamping their hooves in the muck. You hear the constant hammering of the blacksmiths who are working late into the night to repair broken wagon wheels or damaged gear. You hear the shouts of the guards and the occasional drunken brawl breaking out among the common soldiers. There is no privacy. Your tent walls are thin, and you can hear the snoring of the men in the next pavilion and the quiet moans of the wounded or the sick. You lay down on your bedroll, which is damp despite your best efforts to keep it dry. You wrap your cloak tightly around you, but the cold seems to rise up directly from the earth. Your muscles are cramped from the day of riding and the hours of standing in armor. Your back feels like a piece of wood that has been warped by the rain. You try to find a position that does not hurt, but your body is a map of bruises and abrasions. Every time you move, you feel the grit of dried mud against your skin. Tomorrow you will wake up before the sun. You will put on your cold, damp clothes and your squire will help you back into your armor, which is already starting to show orange spots of rust along the rivets. You will climb back onto your horse and spend another 10 hours riding through the rain, following a muddy track through a decimated countryside. You will see the burned-out remains of villages and the carcasses of livestock left to rot in the fields. You will do this for weeks or perhaps months, all for the sake of a border dispute or a dynastic claim that feels very far away from this cold, wet tent. The glamour of knighthood is a coat of paint that wears thin very quickly in the field. Underneath that paint is the reality of a man who is tired, dirty, hungry, and constantly on the verge of falling ill. You are a pinnacle of the social order, a lord of the land, and a master of war. But here, in the middle of a muddy field in a nameless province, you are just another human being trying to survive the filth. You close your eyes and try to sleep, listening to the rain begin to drum against the canvas above your head. It is a heavy, rhythmic sound, a reminder that the world outside is turning into a lake of mud, and tomorrow, you will have to march through it all over again. There is no glory in the muck, only the grim, exhausting endurance of a life lived on the edge of the elements. Your hands are stained with grease and dirt that no amount of scrubbing seems to remove, and your heart longs for the dry stone walls of a castle that feels like a dream from another lifetime. This is the reality of the campaign. This is the price of the spurs you wear. It is not a life of gold and silk, but one of gray skies and the endless, sucking sound of boots in the mire. You are no longer a person. You are a canister of sweat, heavy metal, and desperate, gasping breath. The transition from the slow, agonizing march through the mud to the absolute madness of the melee happens with a violence that no chronicle can truly capture. When your commander gives the signal, and you drop that visor, the world as you know it disappears. Your peripheral vision vanishes, replaced by the narrow, flickering slit of the breath holes and the eye slot. You are looking at the world through a horizontal crack no wider than a finger. The panoramic glory of the battlefield is gone. Now, your entire universe is the 3 feet of churned earth directly in front of your horse's head, and the terrifyingly limited glimpses of whatever steel is swinging toward your neck. As the lines close, the first thing that hits you is not a sword. It is the noise. It is a sound that vibrates through your very marrow. It is the scream of thousands of men, the frantic neighing of horses who know they are being ridden into a wall of sharpened stakes, and the deafening, rhythmic thunder of hooves on hard-packed earth or the wet, slapping thud of mud flying into the air. When the two front lines finally collide, it is not a clean, cinematic clash. It is a car crash. It is the sound of 1,000 blacksmith shops falling down a flight of stairs at the same time. The impact of the heavy cavalry charge is designed to shatter formations, but when the momentum dies and the horses are forced to a halt by the sheer density of human bodies, you are plunged into the meat grinder. You are now in the melee. This is the place where chivalry goes to die. Forget the stories of graceful duels and polite exchanges. In the press of the crowd, you cannot even move your arms properly. You are being shoved from behind by your own men, who are pushing forward with a panicked, primal energy. You are being pressed into the enemy, armor grinding against armor with a screeching sound that sets your teeth on edge. The heat inside your suit begins to climb almost instantly. Within minutes, the temperature rises to a point that would cause a modern athlete to collapse from heatstroke. Your padded gambeson, the thick quilted layer beneath your plate, is already soaked through with sweat, acting like a heavy, hot sponge that weighs you down. You try to breathe, but the air inside your helmet is thick and foul. You are inhaling your own carbon dioxide, and the metallic tang of the steel visor is all you can taste. Every breath is a struggle. It feels like you are trying to suck air through a straw while someone is punching you in the chest. This is the great irony of the knightly armor. The very thing that keeps you from being disemboweled is also the thing that is slowly suffocating you and cooking you alive. In this crush, your long sword is almost useless. There is no room to swing it. You find yourself using the hilt as a hammer or trying to jab the point into the tiny gaps of an opponent's armor. You see a face through a visor 2 inches from your own. You do not see a noble warrior. You see a pair of wide, terrified eyes, just like yours, looking for a way to kill you before you kill them. You see the grime on their helmet, the blood splattered across their crest, and the frantic movement of their hands as they try to grab your sword arm. The combat is a desperate, ugly struggle of grappling and wrestling. You are using your knees, your elbows, and the weight of your entire body to keep from being shoved off your feet. Because if you fall, the danger multiplies by a factor of 10. On the ground, you are a turtle flipped on its back. The mud, that sucking, relentless mire we spoke of, becomes your greatest enemy. Coats your greaves, making your legs feel like they are made of lead. It slicks the soles of your leather boots, making every step a gamble. If you slip and go down in the middle of the press, you might not get back up. Not because you are wounded, but because the sheer weight of the men trampling over you will pin you into the muck until you drown in the liquid earth or are crushed by the boots of your own allies. And then there are the specialized tools of the melee. You realize quickly that the sword is a secondary concern. You watch as a mace or a war hammer whistles through the air. These are the nightmare weapons of the knightly class. They do not need to cut your steel. They just need to hit it. When a 5-pound head of solid iron strikes your helmet, it does not matter if the metal holds. The shockwave travels through the steel, through your padded cap, and directly into your brain. Your vision goes white. Your ears ring with a high, piercing whistle that drowns out the screams of the dying. You are concussed, dizzy, and suddenly your legs feel like water. You see a fellow knight nearby, a man you might have shared wine with just 2 nights ago, being pulled from his horse. He is swarmed by common infantrymen. This is the ultimate indignity and the ultimate terror. These men are not interested in a ransom. They are not interested in the rules of war. They are looking for the gaps. You watch in horror as they use specialized daggers, thin, needle-like blades called misericords, or daggers of mercy. They are designed for one purpose: to slide through the vision slit of a helmet or the small opening in the armpit where the plate meets the mail. It is a cold, mechanical way to die. One moment you are a pinnacle of the social order, a lord of the land, and the next you are being pinned to the ground like an insect while a man in a linen tunic drives 6 inches of steel into your eye. The physical exhaustion of this combat is beyond description. Your heart is hammering against your ribs so hard you can feel it in your throat. Your muscles are screaming as the lactic acid builds up. Every time you lift your arm to parry a blow, it feels as though you are lifting a mountain. The weight of the armor, which felt manageable during a drill, now feels like a coffin you are still trying to walk in. You are blinded by your own salt sweat stinging your eyes, and you cannot reach up to wipe them. You have to blink through the burn, peering through the fogged breath on your visor, trying to distinguish friend from foe in a landscape that has become a monochromatic blur of gray steel and brown mud. There is no glory in this moment. There is only the frantic animal urge to keep moving. If you stop, you die. If you tire, you die. You find yourself stepping over the bodies of men you knew, men who were laughing and boasting only hours before. You hear the wet crunch of bone as horses step on fallen riders. The smell is a sickening cocktail of iron, bowels, and the sulphurous stench of swamp gas released from the churned earth. As the melee drags on, the psychological toll begins to mount. You lose all sense of time. Has it been 10 minutes? Has it been 3 hours? You have no way of knowing. You are trapped in a repetitive cycle of strike, parry, shove, and breathe. Strike, parry, shove, and breathe. You see a mace coming toward your ribs and you barely turn in time to take the blow on your shoulder. The impact numbs your entire left arm, and for a terrifying minute you cannot feel your fingers. You have to switch your weapon to your offhand, praying that your training is enough to keep you alive. This is the reality of the medieval knight in the thick of the fight. It is not a tapestry. It is not a poem. It is a claustrophobic, exhausting, and terrifyingly intimate form of violence. You are close enough to your enemy to smell his bad teeth and feel his hot breath through his visor. You are fighting for your life in a suit of clothes that is trying to kill you as surely as the man in front of you is. And even if you survive this hour, even if you are the one standing when the dust settles, the trauma of the melee will stay in your bones as long as the scars on your skin. You realize that the gold and the titles were a high price to pay for the privilege of being a target in this chaotic, merciless iron storm. The sun begins to dip lower, casting long, distorted shadows across the field, but the killing does not stop. It only gets slower, more labored, and more desperate as the strength of every man on the field finally begins to fail. You step away from the front lines, your lungs burning and your muscles screaming for a reprieve that will never truly come. The battle, for today at least, has subsided into a dull roar of distant shouting and the rhythmic clatter of hammers on anvils as the armorers try to beat the dents out of breastplates. You think you have survived. You have no new holes in your skin, no broken bones that you can feel, and your horse is still standing, even if its head hangs low with exhaustion. You have avoided the spear, the arrow, and the mace. You believe the worst is behind you. But as you walk toward the cluster of tents that makes up your camp, you realize that the air here is different. It does not smell like the open field or the fresh morning dew. It smells of rot, of stagnant water, and of the sour, sharp stench of human waste that no amount of wood smoke can cover. You are entering the domain of the invisible killer, an enemy that does not care for your noble lineage or the quality of your steel. In the medieval world, more knights fall to their own guts than to the blades of their rivals. You feel a slight cramp in your stomach. At first, you dismiss it as the nerves of battle or perhaps the lingering effects of the hard, salted meat you ate 2 days ago. But then the cramp returns, sharper this time, like a hot needle twisting in your abdomen. You find yourself hurrying toward the edge of the camp where the latrine pits have been dug. These are nothing more than shallow trenches, already overflowing from the thousands of men stationed here. There is no privacy. There is no dignity. You, a man who has spent your life training to be a paragon of chivalry and power, find yourself hunched over a filthy hole in the ground, clutching your stomach as the bloody flux begins its work. This is dysentery, and it is the shadow that follows every army. It starts with a simple fever and a loose stool, but within hours, it transforms into a violent, unrelenting assault on your body. You are losing fluids faster than you can drink them. The water available to you comes from a nearby stream that has already been tainted by the horses upstream and the waste of the infantry downstream. Every sip of water you take to quench your raging thirst only brings more bacteria into your system, fueling the fire that is burning you out from the inside. You watch your own strength evaporate. Your hands, which could once snap a spear shaft, now tremble as you try to fasten your tunic. Your skin turns a sickly, translucent gray, and your eyes sink deep into your skull. You are being hollowed out, and there is nothing your sword can do to stop it. As you lie in your tent, shivering under a wool blanket that feels like lead, you hear the sounds of other men suffering the same fate. The camp is a chorus of groans and the wet, rhythmic sounds of sickness. It is an equalizer that the feudal system never intended. The duke in the silk pavilion and the peasant in the mud are both reduced to the same state of wretchedness. You realize that you might not die in a glorious charge under a fluttering banner. You might die here, in the dark, smelling of your own filth, too weak to even swat away the flies that have begun to gather on your face. But perhaps it is not your stomach that fails you first. Perhaps it is a small thing, a minor inconvenience that you barely noticed during the heat of the skirmish. You remember now that a piece of your plate armor had rubbed against your hip, chafing the skin until it broke. Or maybe it was a tiny splinter from a wooden barricade that lodged itself under your fingernail. In a world without soap, without sterile bandages, and without the slightest understanding of germs, these tiny wounds are death sentences. You look at the small scratch on your arm and notice a faint, red line creeping upward toward your shoulder. It looks like a map of a river, glowing angry and hot beneath your skin. The heat from the wound begins to radiate through your entire body. This is sepsis, the poisoning of the blood. Your heart begins to race, pounding against your ribs like a trapped bird. You feel a strange, detached sense of floating as the infection spreads to your organs. Your breath becomes shallow and rapid. You call for the camp surgeon, but when he arrives, he brings no medicine that can help. He carries a rusty blade and a jar of leeches. He speaks of an imbalance of the humors, suggesting that you have too much blood and that the heat in your limb is a sign of your internal fire being out of control. He presses a thumb into the swollen, purple flesh around your wound, and you howl in a way you never did on the battlefield. He decides to bleed you, cutting a vein in your arm to let the bad blood out. As you watch your life force trickle into a wooden bowl, you feel your consciousness slipping. The surgeon is not curing you. He is draining the last of your reserves. He applies a poultice made of moldy bread and dried herbs, but the bacteria are already deep in your bloodstream, multiplying and shutting down your kidneys, your liver, and finally your heart. The invisible killer has found the smallest crack in your armor and used it to tear you down from within. Even if you avoid the flux and the festering wounds, there is the ever-present threat of camp fever. You live in close quarters with hundreds of other men. You sleep on straw that has been damp for weeks. You wear the same padded gambeson for months at a time, and it has become a breeding ground for lice. You feel them crawling across your skin, a constant, maddening itch that you can never quite satisfy. You think of them as a nuisance, a part of the soldiering life, but these tiny insects carry the seeds of typhus. The fever hits you like a physical blow. One moment you are sitting by the fire, and the next you are shaking so violently that you cannot hold your cup. Your head feels as though it is being crushed in a vice. A dull, red rash begins to spread across your chest and back, and your mind begins to wander. You lose track of where you are. You see your mother, long dead, standing in the corner of the tent. You see the faces of the men you have killed, their eyes glowing in the shadows. This is the delirium of the camp fever. You are no longer a knight. You are a ghost inhabiting a failing shell. You scream at enemies that are not there, swinging your arms at the air until you collapse from exhaustion, your tongue swollen and your throat parched. The tragedy of the medieval knight is often painted as one of violent ends on the field of honor, but the reality is much more mundane and much more horrifying. For every knight who is celebrated in a song for his bravery in a siege, there are dozens whose names are forgotten because they died in the mud of a camp before the gates were even breached. You look around at your fellow men at arms and see the toll. The ranks are thinning, not from the arrows of the enemy, but from the invisible swarm. The camp is not a place of rest. It is a waiting room for the grave. The smell of death becomes your constant companion. It is the smell of the lime pits where they throw the bodies of the commoners. It is the smell of the vinegar that the priests splash on their robes as they walk through the tents to deliver the last rites. You realize that your wealth, your titles, and your expensive gear provided you with protection against a mace, but they provided no shield against a microscopic organism. In fact, your heavy woolen clothes and your layers of leather and metal only trapped the sweat and the filth against your skin, making you a more inviting target for the fever and the rot. You lie there, staring at the canvas roof of your tent, listening to the rain hit the fabric. It is a lonely way to go. There is no audience to witness your final moments. There is no chance for a heroic last stand. You are just another body to be disposed of, another set of armor to be cleaned and sold to the next man who thinks that being a knight is about glory and gold. The invisible killers of the medieval age, the dysentery that turns your insides out, the sepsis that rots you while you still breathe, and the fever that steals your mind, are the true masters of the war. They do not care for the rules of engagement. They do not accept ransoms. They simply wait in the mud and the water, silent and patient, until you lay your shield down for just a moment too long. You are a warrior of the highest order, a master of the sword and the horse, but in the end, you are broken by things so small you cannot even see them. This is the hidden reality of your life, the grim price of the camp, where the air you breathe and the water you drink are as deadly as any blade ever forged in fire. As the darkness finally begins to pull at the edges of your vision, you realize that the most dangerous thing you ever did was not charging into the enemy lines, but simply trying to survive the night in a camp of your own making. The ringing in your ears is the only thing you can hear as you lay flat on your back in the churned, bloody muck of a nameless field. Your breath comes in ragged, wet gasps, and every time your lungs expand, they scream against the pressure of your breastplate, which has been dented inward by a heavy mace. Above you, The sky is a dull, indifferent gray, framed by the jagged silhouette of a man standing over you. He is breathing hard too. You see the tip of a narrow dagger, a misericord, hovering just inches from the eye slit of your helmet. This is the moment where the story usually ends for the common foot soldier. For the peasant with a spear or the archer with a bow, that blade would have already found its way through the gap in the visor to end the struggle. But you are a knight. You are a man of noble birth, or at least a man who carries the expensive steel of one. And in this brutal, muddy theater of war, that steel makes you worth far more alive than dead. The man above you shouts something you cannot quite make out through the ringing, but you know the word: yield. He is asking for your surrender, not out of mercy, but out of a cold, calculating desire for profit. When you finally choke out the words of submission, you aren't just giving up your sword. You are signing away your family's future. You are entering into the terrifying world of the ransom economy, a system that turned the chivalric ideal into a predatory financial machine that could crush a noble house more effectively than any siege engine. As you are hauled to your feet, the first thing you feel is the weight of what you have already lost. The enemy soldiers begin to strip you of your primary assets. They take your sword, a blade that might have been in your family for 3 generations. They take your shield, emblazoned with the crest that defined your identity. Most devastatingly, they take your horse. A high-quality destrier is not just an animal. It is the medieval equivalent of a fighter jet, costing more than many villages see in a decade. As you watch your stallion being led away by a squire who can barely contain his excitement, you realize that you are now a man without the tools of your trade. In a single afternoon, you have been demoted from a lord of the battlefield to a walking debt. The journey to your captor's stronghold is not a march to a dungeon, but it is a march to your ruin. Because you are a knight, you are treated with a strange, sickeningly polite form of hospitality. Your captor might even invite you to dine at his table once you reach his castle. He might offer you wine and ask after your family. Do not be fooled by the smiles or the shared stories of the hunt. This is a business transaction. You are being appraised like a prize bull at a fair. Every comfort you are offered, every piece of bread you eat, and every gallon of ale you drink is being meticulously recorded. You are not a guest. You are an investment that must be kept healthy until the payout arrives. The economics of being a knight were always precarious. You spent your entire life pouring every coin you could squeeze from your tenant farmers into your gear, your training, and your public image. You lived on the edge of bankruptcy just to maintain the status required of your rank. Now, that rank has become a noose. The price of your freedom is determined by your status. If you are a minor knight bachelor, the price might be a few £100s of silver. If you are a prominent banneret or a lord, the price could climb into the thousands. This is not money you have sitting in a chest under your bed. This is money that does not exist yet. While you sit in your honorable captivity, watching the seasons change through a stone window, your family back home is entering a nightmare. The letter you were allowed to write home has arrived, and it reads like a death sentence. Your wife, who has been managing the estate in your absence, now has to find a way to liquidate your life. The process begins with the easy things. The surplus grain is sold. The best livestock are driven to market. But it is never enough. Next come the heirlooms. Your mother's jewelry, the silver plates used for feast days, the fine tapestries that kept the draft out of the great hall. They are all bartered away for a fraction of their value to opportunistic merchants who know exactly how desperate your family has become. But the ransom is a mountain that cannot be leveled by selling trinkets. To reach the final sum, your family must begin to tear at the very foundations of your power. They start selling the rights to your land. They sell the timber in your forests, stripping the hillsides bare. They sell the fishing rights to your rivers. They might even have to sell entire villages, transferring the loyalty and the taxes of your people to a rival lord who happened to stay home from the war. By the time the final bag of coin is gathered, your estate is a hollow shell. You are being bought back with the future of your children and your grandchildren. The psychological toll of this is suffocating. In the quiet hours of the night, as you lie on a straw pallet in your captor's tower, you realize that your survival has become a curse. If you had died on that field, your son would have inherited an intact estate. He would have grieved, yes, but he would have been a lord of substance. Now, because you chose to live, he will inherit a wasteland of debt. You are the man who traded his family's legacy for his own skin. The chivalric code told you that your life was precious because of your bloodline, but the reality of the ransom tells you that your bloodline is only as valuable as the silver it can be exchanged for. The physical reality of the ransom process is also grueling. Negotiations can take months, sometimes years. During this time, you are often expected to provide your own clothing and even contribute to the cost of your guards. If the money is slow to arrive, the politeness of your captor can quickly vanish. You might find yourself moved from the comfortable guest chamber to a damp cellar. The meals might become thinner. The threats become more explicit. Your captor has expenses too. He has to pay his own knights, repair his own armor, and fund his next campaign. If you are not paying out, you are a drain on his resources, and a knight who cannot pay is a knight who has outlived his usefulness. Even when the day of your release finally comes, the nightmare is not over. You walk out of the castle gates a free man, but you are a man without a shadow. You have no horse. You have no armor. You have no sword. You must travel back to your lands often on foot or on a borrowed nag, feeling the eyes of the common folk on you. They know what has happened. They know that their taxes are going to rise, that their lives will be harder, and that their lord is a man who was defeated and bartered. The prestige that is supposed to be the armor of the nobility has been stripped away, leaving you exposed to the quiet mockery of the people you are supposed to protect. When you finally crest the hill and see your own manor, it does not look like the home you left. The fences are broken. The fields are poorly tended because there was no money for seed or tools. The great oaks that used to line the drive are gone, sold for ship timber to satisfy a distant creditor. Your wife greets you not with a celebration, but with the weary, haunted eyes of someone who has spent every waking hour fighting a losing battle against math. You are home, but you are a ghost in your own house. This was the hidden trap of the medieval social order. The system was designed to keep the warrior class alive so they could keep fighting, but the cost of that survival was often the destruction of the very social standing they were fighting for. You are now a knight who cannot afford to be a knight. To go to war again would be madness, yet it is the only way you know how to make money. You are caught in a cycle of violence and debt, where the only thing more dangerous than losing your life is losing your liberty. As you sit by a cold hearth in a house that feels like a tomb, you realize that the man who held the dagger to your throat didn't just capture you. He dismantled you. He turned your honor into a commodity and sold it back to you for the price of your soul. The armor you once wore was supposed to protect you, but in the end, it was the very thing that made you a target for a kind of destruction that no shield could ever stop. You are lying in the mud, and the world is starting to tilt. The grand, clashing symphony of the battle has retreated into a dull, rhythmic thumping behind your eyes. Your armor, once your pride and your salvation, now feels like a tomb. It is heavy, cold, and slick with a mixture of rain and something much warmer. You try to draw a breath, but your lungs feel like they are filled with broken glass. This is the moment they never sang about in the hall. The poets always skipped the part where the hero lies in the dirt, clutching a jagged hole in his side, wondering if the next face he sees will be a friend or a scavenger looking to slit his throat for his rings. You feel hands on you. They are not gentle, but they are familiar. Your squires have found you. They hoist you up, and the world turns white with pain as your shattered leg shifts inside your greaves. You want to scream, but your throat is parched and full of grit. They carry you away from the front lines, away from the glory and the mud, toward a cluster of tents where the air smells of wood smoke, vinegar, and something sweet and cloying that makes your stomach turn. You are heading for the surgeon, and in the 14th century, that is a fate many men fear more than the enemy's sword. As you are carried into the tent, your eyes struggle to adjust to the dim, flickering light of grease lamps and charcoal braziers. You are laid out on a wooden table that is stained so deeply with old blood it has turned a dark, bruised purple. There is no white linen here. There are no sterilized instruments. There is only a man in a leather apron, his sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. He is a barber surgeon. He spent his morning trimming the beard of a count, and he will spend his evening trying to keep your soul inside your body using tools that look more at home in a blacksmith shop than a place of healing. You look at the table beside him. You see iron tongs, long, slender probes, various knives with bone handles, and a heavy, jagged saw. There is no anesthesia. There is no magic potion to put you to sleep. If you are lucky, they might give you a cup of sour wine mixed with a bit of herbal tea, or perhaps a piece of leather to bite down on so you do not break your own teeth when the cutting starts. For men move to stand over you. They do not hold your hand. They grip your shoulders and your ankles, pinning you to the wood with the weight of their bodies. They are your anchors to this world, but their grip feels like a trap. The surgeon leans over you. He does not talk about germs or bacteria because he does not know they exist. He talks about the humors and the bad air. He looks at the arrow wound in your shoulder. It is a bodkin point, a long, needle-like tip designed to punch through mail. It did its job well. The shaft has snapped off, leaving the iron head buried deep against your bone. The surgeon takes a metal probe and slides it into the wound. You feel the cold steel sliding past your torn muscle, searching for the obstruction. Every millimeter it moves sends a fresh jolt of electricity through your nervous system. You hear a sharp click. He has found the iron. Now comes the part that requires a stomach of iron. He cannot simply pull it out because the barbs will shred everything in their path. He must use a special set of tongs, perhaps something like the ones designed by John Bradmore to save the life of a young Prince Hal. He widens the wound with a knife, and the sound of the blade parting your skin is a wet, soft hiss that sounds louder than a catapult in the silence of the tent. The surgeon works with a brutal, necessary speed. He is sweating, and a drop falls from his forehead onto your open chest. In a world without antibiotics, that tiny drop could be your death warrant. But you do not know that. You only know the sensation of the tongs entering your body, gripping the iron head, and the agonizing, slow twist as he dislodges it from the bone. Your scream is muffled by the leather in your mouth, a low, guttural animal sound that vibrates in your skull. When the arrowhead is finally pulled free, it comes with a spray of dark blood that coats the surgeon's hands. He does not stop to celebrate. He reaches for a bowl of warm wine and pours it directly into the gaping hole in your shoulder. The sting is a different kind of fire, a sharp, acidic burn that makes your vision go gray at the edges. He tells you that the wound must be cleaned, but his idea of clean is far from yours. He might use honey, which, unbeknownst to him, actually has some antibacterial properties, or he might use a poultice of herbs and grease. But then he looks at your leg. The mace blow you took has turned the bone of your thigh into a collection of splinters. The skin is dark, almost black, and the smell of rot is already beginning to rise. He shakes his head. There is no mending this. To save the man, he must discard the limb. This is the nightmare of every knight. To survive the battle only to be unmade by the saw. The surgeon reaches for the heavy tool with the serrated edge. His assistants tighten their grip. You feel their sweat dripping onto you as they brace for your struggle. The surgeon takes a heavy cord and ties it tight around your thigh to choke off the flow of blood. Then, he makes the first cut with the knife, slicing through the meat until he reaches the bone. The sound of the saw is something you will never forget. It is a rhythmic, rasping noise, like a carpenter working on a stubborn piece of oak. You feel every tooth of the blade as it bites into the hard marrow. The vibration travels through your entire skeleton. You are no longer a knight, no longer a hero of the realm. You are a screaming consciousness trapped in a cage of failing meat. When the bone finally snaps, the relief of the tension is almost as jarring as the pain itself. But the ordeal is not over. The surgeon takes an iron that has been sitting in the glowing coals of the brazier. It is white hot. He presses it against the stump of your leg to cauterize the vessels. The smell hits you instantly. It is the smell of a butcher shop, of a kitchen, of a funeral pyre. It is the smell of your own body being cooked. The smoke rises in thin, acrid plumes, and for a moment, the pain is so intense that your brain simply shuts down. You slip into a dark, welcoming void where the screams can no longer reach you. When you wake hours later, or perhaps days, the tent is quiet. The air is heavy with the groans of other men. You are alive, but you are less than you were. You look down at the bandaged stump where your leg used to be. The bandages are already weeping a yellowish, foul-smelling fluid. The surgeon visits you and looks at the discharge with a nod of approval. He calls it laudable pus. In his mind, this is a sign that the bad humors are leaving your body, that the wound is healing from the inside out. He does not know that this fluid is the herald of an infection that will likely claim your life in a week. He does not know about sepsis or the way the poison will creep through your veins until your heart gives out. You lie there in the dark, listening to the rain hit the canvas of the tent. You think about the shining armor you wore this morning. You think about the way the sun glinted off your sword as you charged into the fray. It all seems like a dream from another life. The reality of the knight's life is not the charge or the trophy. It is the long, slow wait in a tent that smells of death, watching the infection climb your limb like an invisible fire. You see the other men around you. Some are staring at the ceiling with glassy eyes. Others are whispering prayers to saints who seem very far away. Even if you survive the fever, even if the laudable pus clears and the skin closes over the stump, what is left for you? A knight who cannot ride is a man without a purpose. You will return home to a drafty stone manor, listening to the wind howl through the gaps in the masonry, feeling the ghost of your missing foot itch in the cold. You will carry the scars of the cautery iron and the memory of the saw until the day you die. The glory of the battlefield is a fleeting thing, a puff of smoke in the wind, but the trauma of the surgeon's table is a mark that never fades. You realize then that the armor did not just fail to protect your body. It failed to protect the person you used to be before the screams in the dark changed everything. You stand in the great hall of your lord, the air thick with the scent of roasting venison, expensive beeswax candles, and the heavy, cloying perfume of people who rarely bathe but possess the coin to hide it. The stone floor beneath your boots is cold, a reminder of the many miles you have marched and the mud you have slept in. But here, in the flickering light of the hearth, you are not allowed to be tired. You are not allowed to be haunted. You are a knight of the realm, and you are currently trapped in a cage made of invisible gold bars. This is the world of chivalry, and while the poets sing of it as a glorious virtue, for you, it is a suffocating weight that threatens to crush the very soul it claims to refine. You might think that, after surviving the horrors of the front lines, the worst was over. You have seen the worst that humanity has to offer, and you have survived it. But as you look around the room at the smiling faces of the nobility, you realize that the battlefield was, in many ways, more honest than this. In war, the enemy is in front of you. In the court, the enemy is your own reputation, and it is a foe you can never truly defeat. Chivalry is not just a code of conduct for you. It is a high-stakes performance that you must give every single second of every single day, from the moment you wake up in your drafty manner until the moment you close your eyes at night. Consider the physical toll of just standing here. You are expected to carry yourself with a specific kind of grace, a quiet strength that suggests you are both a lion and a lamb. Your back must be straight, even though the weight of your years in harness has left you with a constant, dull ache in your spine. Your hands, calloused and scarred from the hilt of a sword and the reins of a charging destrier, must handle a delicate wine goblet with the gentleness of a monk handling a holy relic. If you stumble, if you slouch, or if you show the slightest hint of the physical decay that is eating away at your body, you are failing. You are no longer the ideal. You are becoming a liability to your lineage, and that lineage is everything. In this world, you are not just a man. You are the living embodiment of your ancestors. You carry their names like a heavy cloak, and every action you take either polishes their memory or stains it with soot. The pressure is relentless. You feel it in the way the younger squires look at you, searching for a crack in your armor. You feel it in the way the ladies of the court whisper behind their fans, judging your every word. Chivalry demands that you be a paragon of courtly love, a concept that feels like a cruel joke to a man who has spent months eating hardtack and watching friends die in the dirt. You are expected to participate in the dance of romance, to compose verses or at least recite them, to champion a lady's honor in games of wit and skill. You must pretend that your heart is aflutter with the delicate sensibilities of a troubadour's song, even when your heart feels like a piece of cold iron. If a lady drops her handkerchief, you must be there to retrieve it with a bow that does not betray the fact that your knees click and pop with every movement. You must speak of devotion and purity while your mind is still filled with the roar of the melee and the smell of burning thatch. The cognitive dissonance is staggering. You are a professional killer being asked to play the role of a sensitive poet, and the penalty for breaking character is social death. But the social weight is only half the burden. The financial cost of chivalry is what truly keeps the chokehold tight. To be a knight is to be perpetually broke or teetering on the edge of ruin. To maintain the expected level of chivalric display, you must spend money you do not have. Your armor cannot just be functional. It must be fashionable. It must be engraved, polished, and updated to the latest style, or you will be mocked as a backwater relic. Your horses are not just animals. They are symbols of your status, requiring enormous amounts of grain, specialized stabling, and expensive tack. You are expected to give lavish gifts, to host feasts you cannot afford, and to dress in silks and furs that cost more than a dozen of your peasants will earn in their entire lives. You look down at your sleeves, lined with miniver fur, and you think of the leaking roof of your manor house. You think of the debt you owe to the merchants in the city, men you are supposed to look down upon but who actually hold your very life in their ledgers. You are a noble, yet you are a slave to the optics of nobility. If you stop spending, you lose your status. If you lose your status, you lose your land. If you lose your land, you are nothing. So you smile and you offer another toast, and you pray that the next harvest is bountiful enough to pay for the horse you lost in the last skirmish. Then there is the crushing weight of the moral paradox. The church tells you that pride is a deadly sin, yet your entire life is built upon the pursuit of glory and the defense of your honor. You are told to be humble, but if you do not boast of your deeds or display your heraldry with pride, you are invisible. You are told to be a man of peace, yet your only value to society is your ability to wage war. You spend your mornings in the chapel, praying for the souls of those you have killed, and your afternoons in the practice yard, refining the techniques you will use to kill more. The priests tell you that to kill is a sin, but to kill the enemies of the faith is a virtue. You are caught in a theological trap, constantly trying to balance the scales of your soul while the world demands you keep your sword sharp. This constant performance leads to a hollowed-out existence. You begin to wonder who you actually are when the armor is off and the candles are blown out. Are you the brave hero of the songs? Or are you the exhausted, terrified man who just wants to sit in the sun and never hear a trumpet blast again? You can never tell anyone the truth. To admit to fear, to admit to exhaustion, or to admit that you find the rituals of the court absurd would be a betrayal of the code. You are isolated by your own excellence. You are surrounded by people, yet you are utterly alone because you can never lower the visor of your social persona. Even your leisure time is a test. You are expected to hunt, not for food, but for the display of your mastery over nature. You must follow the complex rules of the chase, knowing exactly which horn signal to blow and how to dress a stag with the precision of a surgeon. A mistake in the hunting field is as much a stain on your honor as a mistake on the battlefield. You are always being watched. You are always being judged. The eyes of your peers are like 1,000 little needles, picking at the fabric of your composure. As the evening wears on in the great hall, the music swells, and the laughter grows louder. You feel a sudden, sharp longing for the silence of the woods or even the stark simplicity of the camp. There, at least, the expectations were clear. You had to stay alive, and you had to keep the man next to you alive. Here, the rules are written in smoke. You are chasing a phantom of perfection that no human being can ever truly reach. Chivalry was designed to tame the violent impulses of your class, to turn monsters into gentlemen, but in doing so, it has created a different kind of monster. It has created a man who is a stranger to himself, a man who must sacrifice his comfort, his wealth, and his mental peace on the altar of a social ideal. You take a deep breath, smoothing the front of your tunic. You feel the cold weight of your signet ring on your finger, a heavy reminder of the family you must represent. You step forward into the light, ready to deliver another witty remark, to offer another polite bow, and to play your part in the grand pageant. Your heart might be heavy, and your mind might be screaming for a way out, but the chokehold of chivalry is tight, and it will not let go until the day they lay your effigy in stone, perfectly poised, perfectly graceful, and finally, mercifully silent. You are a knight, and for all the glory that title brings, you are perhaps the least free man in the kingdom. The weight of the world is on your shoulders, and you are not allowed to let it show. You are the wall that protects the realm, but you are also the prisoner inside it, waiting for a release that only time or the blade can eventually provide. You stand on the battlements of a fortress that was once a symbol of your family's unshakable power. But today, those massive limestone blocks feel less like a shield and more like the sides of a very large, very cold coffin. The sun is dipping below the horizon, casting long, skeletal shadows across the courtyard below. You wrap your woolen cloak tighter around your shoulders, but it does little to stop the damp chill that has settled deep into your marrow. The air here does not circulate. It is heavy with the scent of old smoke, unwashed bodies, and the sharp metallic tang of fear. You look out over the parapet, past the sharpened wooden stakes and the dry moat, to the fires of the enemy camp. They are eating well tonight. You can smell the roasted pork and the charred wood on the breeze, a scent so agonizingly sweet it makes your stomach cramp with a violence that nearly brings you to your knees. In the stories the troubadours sing in the warm halls of the South, a siege is a test of will and a display of grand engineering. They speak of the brave knight standing tall against the rain of arrows, his armor shining under the midday sun. But you know the truth now. A siege is not a battle of swords or a clash of noble hearts. It is a slow, grinding war of attrition fought between your intestines and your sanity. You have been trapped behind these walls for 4 months. The first few weeks were almost exciting, a chance to prove your mettle and hold the line. But the excitement evaporated along with the flour and the salted beef. Now you are just a ghost in a suit of rusted iron, waiting for a relief army that you suspect will never crest the hill. The hunger is not a sudden pang. It is a constant, rhythmic drumming in the back of your mind. It has changed you. First, you were picky. You complained when the bread became hard enough to break a tooth and when the wine turned to vinegar. Then the meat ran out. You remember the day the commander ordered the slaughter of the pack mules. You ate that stringy, tough meat like it was a banquet at the king's table. But that was weeks ago. Now, the hierarchy of survival has stripped away every layer of your knightly dignity. You have watched the servants hunting for rats in the cellars, and you have found yourself looking at the scurrying rodents not with disgust, but with a predatory envy. You have seen men boil their leather belts and the tongues of their shoes, hoping to extract some phantom ounce of nutrition from the cured hides. The most painful loss, however, was not the food. It was your horse. For a knight, a horse is not just a tool or a beast of burden. It is your partner, your status, and your identity. Your great destrier, a powerful creature that had carried you through 2 seasons of campaigning, eventually succumbed to the lack of fodder. You watched as the stable hands led him out, his ribs showing through his once glossy coat. You had to turn your head away when the blade fell. That night, you ate a portion of the animal that had been your pride and joy. You didn't do it out of cruelty, but out of a desperate, animalistic need to keep your heart beating for one more day. As you chewed the tough, bitter meat, you felt a part of your soul die. A knight without a horse is just a man in a very heavy, very expensive suit of clothes. And that armor, once your pride, has become your greatest burden. You have lost so much weight that your breastplate no longer fits. It rattles against your chest with every breath, a constant reminder of how much of yourself has withered away. You are supposed to remain in full harness, ready to repel a breach at a moment's notice, but the weight of the steel is becoming unbearable. Your joints ache from the dampness of the stone walls, and sores are beginning to form where the metal rubs against your papery skin. You are a warrior of the realm, yet you find yourself struggling just to climb the spiral staircase to the watchtower. Your legs feel like lead, and your vision swims with dark spots if you move too quickly. The physical decay is only half of the nightmare. The psychological weight of the siege is what truly breaks a man. You are trapped in a world that has shrunk to the size of a few acres. You know every crack in the stone, every leak in the roof, and every desperate look in the eyes of your companions. The silence is the worst part. Between the occasional crash of a trebuchet stone against the outer curtain wall, there is a silence so profound it feels like the world outside has ceased to exist. You are forgotten. The king is busy with his own problems, and your allies are likely weighing the cost of a rescue against the value of your life. You realize with a sinking horror that you are worth more to them as a martyr than as a living man who needs to be fed. Disease is the silent intruder that follows hunger through the gates. With so many people crammed into a small space, and with the wells running low, the castle has become a breeding ground for sickness. You see the signs everywhere. The pale faces, the shivering fits, and the constant, wretched sounds of men suffering from dysentery. The latrines are overflowing, and the stench is a thick, physical presence that you can taste in the back of your throat. You try to keep your area clean, you try to maintain some semblance of the nightly order, but it is a losing battle. When the body is starved, the spirit follows, and when the spirit breaks, the will to keep clean and upright vanishes. You see your fellow knights, men you once respected, sitting in the mud, staring at nothing with hollow, unblinking eyes. The enemy knows this. They do not need to storm the walls and risk their lives against your spears. They only need to wait. They play games with your mind. Sometimes, they will throw the heads of captured messengers over the walls using their catapults, a grisly reminder that no help is coming. Other times, they will roast entire oxen just outside the range of your archers, making sure the wind carries the scent directly into the castle. They want you to know that while you are dying for a patch of cold stone, they are thriving. They want you to turn on your commanders. They want the peasants inside to riot. And as you look at the desperate, hungry faces of the townspeople who fled to the castle for protection, you see the seeds of that violence beginning to sprout. They look at your polished sword and your remaining rations with a growing, silent resentment. You find yourself wandering the ramparts at night, unable to sleep. Every shadow looks like a ladder leaning against the wall. Every rustle of the wind sounds like the muffled footsteps of an assassin. Paranoia becomes your only companion. You begin to distrust your own men, who might be tempted by an offer of gold and a full stomach to open the postern gate in the dead of night. You sleep with your dagger in your hand, not because you fear the enemy outside, but because you fear the desperate men inside. The chivalric code, the oaths of brotherhood, the grand ideals of the knighthood, they all seem like fairy tales told to children in a world that no longer exists. Here, in the shadow of the stone, there is only the hunger and the dark. The sun finally sets, and the campfires of the besiegers glow like 1,000 predatory eyes in the distance. You lean your head against the cold granite of the Merlin and close your eyes. You dream of a loaf of warm bread, thick with butter and honey. You dream of a stream of clear, cold water that never runs dry. But then you wake to the sound of a distant, rhythmic thumping. The enemy is winding their machines again. Another night of terror is beginning. You pull your cloak tighter, feeling the sharp bones of your shoulders poking through your tunic. You are a knight, a protector of the weak, and a master of the battlefield. But as the first stone of the night whistles through the air and crashes into the keep, you realize that you are nothing more than a prisoner of your own fortress, waiting for the end in a tomb of your own making. The shadows are closing in, and the walls that were meant to keep you safe have become the very things that are crushing the life out of you. one hungry day at a time. You are sitting atop a massive destrier, a warhorse bred for nothing but the chaos of the charge. Your world is filtered through the thin, narrow slits of a steel visor. It is a cramped, metallic perspective that smells of your own hot breath and the heavy scent of horse sweat. You feel like a god of the battlefield. You are encased in a fortune's worth of tempered steel, plates that have been hammered and polished until they shine like a mirror. You are the elite. You are the pinnacle of centuries of social and military evolution. Behind you and beside you, hundreds of your peers sit in the same heavy silence, a wall of iron and ego ready to crush anything that stands in your way. You have spent your entire life preparing for this moment. You have been trained since the age of 7 to sit this saddle, to wield this lance, and to fear no man. But as you look across the muddy field toward the enemy lines, you see something that should be beneath your notice. You see rows of men who are not lords, not landholders, and certainly not your equals. They are peasants. They are dirty. They are wearing quilted linen tunics instead of plate armor, and they are holding simple sticks of yew wood. To a man of your status, they look like nothing more than a nuisance. They are the background characters of history, the labor force that is supposed to flee at the first sight of your charge. You expect them to break. You expect them to run and scream as you thunder toward them. You prepare to lower your lance, feeling the immense power of the horse beneath you. But then you hear it. It is a sound like the rushing of a great wind or the dry rattle of 1,000 snakes. You look up, and the sun is gone. The sky has turned a bruised, flickering gray. In that split second, you realize the sky is not filled with clouds, but with thousands of shafts of wood tipped with sharpened steel. This is the moment the fantasy of knightly invincibility begins to shatter. This is the moment you realize that all your wealth, your titles, and your years of training are about to be tested by a man who has never owned a horse in his life. The longbow is not just a weapon. It is a machine of pure, agonizing physics. As you begin your charge, the first volley of arrows arrives. You hear the sound first, a terrifying rhythmic clatter that sounds like heavy hail falling on a tin roof. It is the sound of iron meeting iron. An arrow strikes your breastplate, and the force of it nearly knocks the wind out of you. It does not penetrate, but the impact vibrates through your entire ribcage. You see a man to your left, a knight of noble birth and legendary courage, suddenly jerk backward in his saddle. An arrow has found the small, vulnerable gap beneath his armpit as he raised his lance. He falls, and his horse, spooked by the sudden weight shift and the sting of arrows in its own flanks, begins to panic. You try to keep your horse under control, but the animal is screaming now. A warhorse is a brave creature, but even it has limits. It is being peppered by what the chroniclers call the iron rain. The arrows are not just hitting the riders. They are lancing into the soft flesh of the horses. Your mount rears up, and you feel the sickening sensation of losing your balance. Around you, the charge is turning into a slaughterhouse. The muddy ground is becoming a soup of blood and earth, and the rhythmic thudding of hooves is replaced by the wet, slapping sounds of men and animals falling into the mire. You need to understand the man who is doing this to you. He is a peasant, yes, but he is a peasant who has been shaped by a lifetime of brutal labor. In England, the law mandates that every able-bodied man must practice with the longbow every Sunday. This is not a hobby. It is a national obsession. By the time this archer faces you, his body has been physically deformed by the bow. Archaeologists will find his skeleton centuries later and recognize him by the thickened bone in his left arm and the enlarged shoulder blade on his right. He pulls a bow that requires over 100 pounds of force to draw. He can launch 10 to 12 arrows a minute. When you multiply that by 5,000 archers, you are facing 60,000 projectiles every 60 seconds. It is the medieval equivalent of a machine gun. As you struggle to stay upright, you realize the archers are not just firing randomly. They are using bodkin points. These are long, thin, needle-like arrowheads specifically designed to punch through chainmail and even thin sections of plate armor. You feel a sharp, white-hot sting in your thigh. You look down to see a shaft of wood vibrating in your leg. It has pierced through the mail and deep into the muscle. The pain is sudden and nauseating. You are no longer a soaring hero of chivalry. You are a wounded man trapped in a heavy metal suit, stuck in a field of deep, clinging mud. The mud is perhaps your greatest enemy now. Because of the heavy rains, the field has become a trap. Every time you try to move, the suction of the clay pulls at your armored feet. Your armor, which weighs 60 or 70 pounds, is no longer a shield. It is an anchor. You see your fellow knights falling all around you. Because of the density of the formation, those in the back are pushing those in the front. You are being crushed together in a terrifying metallic crush. Men are falling face down in the mud and, because of the weight of their armor and the press of the crowd, they cannot get back up. They are drowning in 2 inches of water and filth, right in the middle of a battlefield. You see an archer approaching you. He is not staying behind his stakes anymore. He has seen the chaos, and he is coming for the harvest. He is not carrying a bow now. He has a lead-weighted mallet and a long, thin dagger called a misericord, the dagger of mercy. It is a cruel irony. He looks at you not with respect or fear, but with the cold calculation of a man looking at a valuable piece of livestock. He knows that your armor is worth more than his house. He knows that if he captures you, he can demand a ransom that will change his family's life forever. But if you resist, or if you are too badly wounded to move, he will simply find the gap in your visor and end your story with a single thrust. The physical sensation of being a knight in this moment is one of total claustrophobia. Your vision is obscured by the mud smeared across your visor. You are gasping for air, but the air inside your helmet is hot, stale, and smells of copper. You can hear the screams of horses and the frantic prayers of dying men, but everything sounds muffled, as if you are underwater. You feel the heavy, dull thud of a mallet hitting your helmet, and your world explodes into white light. You fall back into the mud, and the weight of your own equipment pins you down. This is the reality that the tapestries and the songs never mention. They talk about the glory of the charge and the glitter of the sun on shields. They do not talk about the indignity of being brought low by a man you considered a subhuman. They do not talk about the terrifying efficiency of a piece of wood and a string. The longbow changed the world because it democratized death. It meant that a year of a knight's income spent on armor could be nullified by a weapon that cost a few shillings. It meant that the social order, where the man on the horse ruled the man on the ground, was beginning to crumble. As you lie there, looking up at the sky through the narrow slit of your helmet, you see another volley of arrows arching overhead. They look like a swarm of angry bees, a dark curtain being drawn across the world. You realize that the age of the knight is not just ending because of the arrows. It is ending because the battlefield is no longer a place of individual glory. It has become a place of industrial-scale slaughter. Your individual skill with the sword, your lineage, and your courage do not matter to the arrow. The arrow does not care who your father was. It does not care how much your armor cost. It only cares about the physics of the impact and the vulnerability of the flesh beneath the steel. You feel the weight of another man stepping on your chest, his muddy boots sliding over your polished breastplate. You hear the grunt of effort as a peasant archer hauls a wounded knight out of the mud to check his coat of arms. You are no longer a warrior. You are a commodity. You are a victim of a changing world. A world where the sting of a peasant's arrow has more power than the mandate of a king. The mud is cold. The pain in your leg is a steady, rhythmic throb, and the sky continues to rain iron. This is the end of the dream of the invincible elite. This is the moment the armor failed, and the sting of the arrow changed the course of history forever. The morning light is a thin, gray needle that pricks at your eyes as you wake. You do not move at first. You cannot. The straw of your mattress is thin, and the stone floor beneath it has spent the night sucking the warmth from your marrow. When you finally attempt to shift, the sound that comes from your body is not a human sound. It is the creak of an old gate or the groan of a ship in a storm. Your lower back is a knot of fused bone and angry nerves. Your knees, which spent decades gripped tight against the flanks of charging war horses, now refuse to straighten without a fight. This is the first betrayal of the life you chose. You were told that knighthood was a path of glory, but the poets forgot to mention that the glory fades while the agony remains. You look at your hands in the dim light. They are gnarled and thick, the knuckles swollen with the dampness of the winter. There is a white, jagged line that runs from your wrist up to your elbow. You remember the day you received it. It was a tournament, a festive affair full of bright silk and the smell of roasting meat. A splintered lance caught you just right, tearing through the mail and deep into the meat of your arm. The physician of the Lord sewed it shut with a dirty needle and thread that smelled of vinegar. You were lucky. You did not lose the limb to the rot, but you lost the use of 2 fingers. They hang limp and useless now, a permanent reminder that even in play, the life of a knight was a dance with mutilation. Every scar on your body tells a similar story of a moment where you almost stopped breathing. In the corner of your small, drafty room sits the suit of plate that once defined your existence. It is no longer the gleaming mirror that reflected the sun on the day of your dubbing. It is a heap of dull, gray iron. If you look closely, you can see the orange bloom of rust creeping around the rivets. Rust is the great enemy of the retired warrior. It is a slow, silent fire that eats away at the very thing that kept you alive on the field of battle. You should clean it. You should take the oil and the rags and spend the afternoon scouring the metal back to a shine. But your hands hurt too much to hold the cloth, and besides, what would be the point? There are no more battles for you. There are no more parades. The armor is just a heavy shell for a man who is no longer there. It is a tomb of steel that you are not yet ready to inhabit. The poverty is perhaps the most surprising part of this ending. People see the gold on the spurs and the fine fabric of the surcoat, and they assume you are a man of infinite means. They do not see the ledgers. They do not see the debts you took on to buy that very armor. A good suit of plate cost as much as a small farm. The war horses, the massive beasts that could carry a man in full metal at a gallop, cost even more. You had to pay for your squires. You had to pay for the banners. You had to pay for the transport of your gear across the sea. And if you were captured, the ransom would strip your family of every coin they had. You are a noble, yes, but you are a noble who is one bad season or one lost battle away from total ruin. You sit in your manor now and you watch the rain leak through the thatch because you cannot afford the laborers to fix it. The world is changing around you, and it does not care that you are a relic of a different age. You remember when the knight was the undisputed king of the battlefield. You were the ultimate weapon. When you and your brothers lowered your lances and gave the spurs to your mounts, the earth shook and the infantry fled in terror. But those days are gone. You saw the change at the great battles where the mud was deep and the sky was dark with arrows. You saw men of low birth, peasants with bows made of you, bring down the finest lords of the land from 200 paces. It was not honorable. It was not the way the stories said it should be. There is no courage in a piece of wood and a string, yet it killed your friends just the same. And now there is the powder, the black dust that screams and spits fire. It makes your plate armor feel like a thin layer of parchment. You are lonely in a way that is hard to describe to the young men who still dream of the spurs. Most of the men you broke bread with are under the dirt. Some died in the frantic, bloody chaos of the melee. Others died in the long, slow misery of a siege, taken by the flux or the fever before a single sword was drawn. You are the one who survived, but survival feels like a punishment. The young squires in the courtyard look at you and they do not see a hero. They see a cautionary tale. They see a man who smells of old leather and stale ale, muttering about battles that happened before they were born. They do not want to hear about the heat of the sun inside a closed helm or the way the blood slicked the grass until you could not keep your footing. They want to hear about the ladies and the songs. They do not want the truth of the rust. At night, the memories come for you. When the fire burns low and the shadows stretch across the stone walls, you hear the sounds again. It is not the music of the court. It is the sound of metal hitting bone. It is the scream of a horse that has been hamstrung. It is the way a man sounds when he is pleading for his life in a language you do not understand. You have killed men. You have looked into their eyes as the life left them, and you did it because that was your job. That was your sacred duty. But now, in the silence of your old age, those faces return. You wonder if they had wives who are now sitting in drafty rooms just like this one. You wonder if their knees hurt when the rain comes. The weight of the lives you took is heavier than the armor ever was. Your estate is a skeleton of what it should be. The fields are not as productive as they once were because you were not there to oversee them. You were away in the service of your Lord, chasing shadows in a foreign land. The fences are broken. The peasants who work the land look at you with a mixture of resentment and pity. They know that you are the one who is supposed to protect them, but they also know that you can barely walk to the chapel without gasping for breath. You are a protector who needs protection. The feudal bargain is breaking, and you are the one caught in the middle. You gave your youth and your blood to the land, and in return, the land is giving you nothing but dust and taxes. Perhaps you will end your days in a monastery. Many of your kind do. You will trade your sword for a prayer book and your silk for a rough wool robe. You will spend your hours in the cold chapel, asking for forgiveness for the things you did in the name of chivalry. It is a quiet life, but it is not a peaceful one. The monks do not understand the fire that used to burn in your gut. They do not know what it is like to feel the power of 1,000 pounds of horse and man hitting a line of shields. You are a wolf among sheep, but a wolf with no teeth and no pack. You will die and they will bury you under a stone with a cross on it, and within a generation, no one will remember your name or the battles you won. You look at the son who will take your place. He is young and strong, and his eyes are full of the same fire that once burned in yours. You want to tell him to run. You want to tell him to put down the sword and find a life that does not involve the breaking of bones and the ruining of the soul. But you cannot. It is the way of the world. You will help him lace his boots. You will give him your sword, now polished to a deceptive shine. You will watch him ride away, knowing that in 30 years, he will be sitting in this same chair, feeling the same cold in his joints, wondering where the glory went. The cycle of the night is a cycle of ruin, and you are just one more link in the chain. The knight is a figure of legend now, a shimmering icon of a lost age. But you know better. You know that the life of a warrior was not a tapestry of gold and blue. It was a long, slow grind of physical pain, financial desperation, and the eventual realization that you were obsolete. The rust on your armor is not just a sign of neglect. It is a symbol of the truth. Everything breaks, everything fades, and for the knight who lived through the wars, the end was not a glorious death on the field. It was the long, cold wait for the heart to finally stop beating in a body that had already given up long ago. This is the end of the road. This is the rust and the ruin of the broken warrior.